So, today I have brought you here
To my house.
to your own house to talk to you about parenting, um, how we parent differently.
Okay.
It's a struggle for me sometimes because obviously we have different outlooks at different stages at what we believe life for our kids should look like.
Mm-hmm.
And we try to have conversations. Sometimes we have conversations, but I think in practice, we differ. And I think a lot of times we differ on how we're raising our son.
Mm-hmm.
And our relationship has very interesting dynamics when it comes to money, when it comes to sex, when it comes to ministry things, when it comes to being best friends in our marriage. Our relationship has a bunch of different dynamics, from a who's more likely to kind of take the lead, or who's kind of more likely to step out and be the more aggressive one,
Yeah.
or the more outgoing one, who's going to kind of pull back, but definitely I can sense that with the raising of our son specifically, there is a pull for that spot of what's the word I'm looking for? Not so much aggression necessarily, but like that spot of either authority or finality. Like, this is the way this is gonna go. And I kind of just wanted to kind of work that through with you, because it's very clear in other areas. There are obviously areas I'm willing to yield to things that you may want.
For sure.
This is a place I'm really reluctant to yield almost anything. And I won't say absolutely nothing, because I'm not a perfect man. But every man, in my opinion, knows what, or has a feeling or a desire of how he wants his son to turn out.
For sure.
And some of it's flawed, because some of it is, I just don't want you to be like me.
For
or
sure.
I don't want you to make the mistakes I made. All that TV movie stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'll just kind of start there.
Okay. We had a recent conversation where we talked about the fact that when we got married, or even before we got married, we discussed at least how we wanted to be as parents.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about, we talked about the relationship that we wanted to have with our kids. We talked about how we were raised and how we wanted to incorporate some of the things
Mm-hmm.
that we experienced as kids, while there are things that we experienced or didn't experience that we did not want to bring into how we raise our kids. And then we got pregnant,
Mm-hmm.
and we had babies, and we talked a lot about how we would breastfeed or not breastfeed, formula, Pampers versus cloth diapers, babysitting, like all of those things we talked about. We had a lot of conversation, and we both felt the same way, so we didn't have to have extensive conversations because we both landed on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
But then our kids grew up, had personalities, had strengths and weaknesses, and you and I we haven't really had a lot of conversation or extensive conversation.
True.
About what we see, where they are, and how we wanted to tackle those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like a lot of times we go off to parents or go off to discipline without bringing each other along to say, hey, I have spent this amount of time with my son or my daughter, and I see that this is an issue or problem, and I want us together to tackle it in this way.
Mm-hmm.
And then give roles or whatever. And so I do feel like there are times where you go off to do something,
Mm-hmm.
and I have no
Nobody
idea
knows
what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And
You ever heard of Joe Clark?
yeah. What about it?
That's exactly the way I like it.
So you're saying that you want
No,
a
no, no,
parent
no, no.
and
I'm
you
sorry.
don't want me to have anything.
No,
you don't want me to
I'm
even
not.
know what's
I'm
happening.
sorry. So let me say this. It's not that I don't want you to know what's happening. I feel like there are a lot of times where I can't stop in a moment where I feel like this is a teaching moment for my son from his father, that I can't stop to have a conversation with you. I can't pause this opportunity to then catch up with you and say, well, at some point you could be working, you could be on the phone, you could be doing something, you could be doing your hair, and it's like, well, I gotta wait till you're done so I can have this. Like, I would say with a boy's mind, or at least with that boy's mind, there are some opportunities that I have right then and there to teach some kind of lesson, to create a memory that could form or help mold his mind in the way he perceives life.
Yeah.
That I have that moment right there, that I don't have or I'll say, I don't believe that I have the time to ignore that, in my opinion, to then get with you later to have a conversation about it.
No, and you're right. I love the age that my son is, and I love the fact that you as a father are like, I want to cut things off at the pass. I want to take every opportunity I have to teach my son and impart wisdom and into my son and all of these things. I love that, because unfortunately there are a lot of fathers who don't do that. And I want you to, but I want to know where you're going. And so what I mean by that is, and I'll go back to what I just said before, we don't talk before these events happen. And so I think that if you and I have been having consistent conversation about how we want to raise our almost preteen, and saying, hey, these are going to be some of the things that I'm looking for. Hey, I see these weaknesses. And so whenever I see that, I want to be able to, do this, that, and the third. And this is how I would like for you to support me in that. Because I'm with our son 80% of the time. Mm-hmm. And so there are things that I see that you don't see. And we don't talk about them.
So just to kind of respond to that, like, so I wasn't gonna say one could say, but I will say, if, like, you've mentioned that before, like, you are with him the majority of the time of his life right now, like, because he is a kid and I go to work or whatever, like, you are with him a lot of the time. And then you're like, but there's things that you don't see, and we don't talk about it. I'm like, we don't have to go into a whole what comes first, the chicken or the egg conversation, because you might say, okay, well, you can come home and say, tell me something about DJ that happened today, or tell me something about his, or you could just tell me
that's
things
fine.
that I don't know. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, none of that is going to deter my feeling as a father to lead and guide him when the opportunities present themselves.
And I don't want that. As a matter of fact, I want to empower you with information so that when you go off on a whim to say, hey, I see a teaching opportunity, I'm going to take all of the information of who my son is, not just the 20% that I see. I'm going to be able to not only take what I see and know as a man, but I'm going to use my very qualified wife who has all of the information.
So is this a matter of you not feeling included?
Yeah.
Okay.
So here's the thing. I'm still his mom, and you have given me the beautiful job of being a housewife or a house mom or a stay-at-home mom, And so I have a lot of information that I want to give you, to say, hey, and I'm saying it's my fault. It's my fault that I don't and haven't given you this information. But when you go off to discipline him, I want to know that you're disciplining him with all of the information. And so basically my thing is, we need to talk more so that when you go off to discipline him, I'm assured, like, I know where you're coming from. But there's a lot of times where I don't know where you're coming from. We're not on the same page because we haven't talked. And now the child that I have birthed and the child that I spend the majority of my time with is being disciplined with 20% of information of who my son is, not being a black man, but being a black DJ Morris. And so my thing is like, I want us to just talk more so that you are empowered to say, I'm going to take my son and do these exercises, and I don't want you to have anything to do with it. Like, but I'm sorry, like, he's my son who I birthed and who I spent a lot of time with. And there are times, and so I'll use this as an example. There are times where you will see DJ do something, and with a little bit of information, you feel like you can discipline, and you'll discipline without the information. And then I'm like, what was that all about? Oh, well, DJ did this. Oh, well, I told him that he could. Oh. So now you've yelled at or disciplined or spanked with him with small information, and now you have to go back and apologize. But he's already been spanked or yelled at or disciplined because you don't have information. And my thing's like, I don't want my son to feel like he's not known when you talk to him. I want my son to feel like his father knows him. Now, you're not here, during the day, and it's fine, it's great, but then we should talk. And I can tell you, this is how he is in school. This is how he is at home. This is how he is with his sister. These are the things that I'm seeing. And then I want you to go off and do your male bonding. And I don't have to be a part of that male bonding time, but I know that my husband has information, and he can say, I know that your mother has said this, and this to you, and you're still not getting it. So now we need to talk. I know who you are, not just you're black, but I know who you are, or you're a man. You have a penis. And so because you have a penis and because you're black, that qualifies me to tell you everything that you need to know that pertains to you. But it's like, but who is he as an actual individual person? Do you know everything of who he is to be able to know how to talk to him, not just a man?
Yeah, so I understand that. I think also some of those moments, and those are not all discipline moments.
They're just raising.
They're right. And so some of that is not going to come from a conversation between you and I. Like, no one told you. You got this information that you have by spending time with him.
Yeah.
And so when I'm having conversations with him, I'm doing the same thing. So just for clarity, the whole discipline thing is very few and far between. But when it comes to dealing with him, raising him, teaching him how to think, like, I want my son to have a strong mind. It's not a whole lot that I need to get from you in order to talk to him.
And that's fine.
In those difficult times, in those opportunities. So I think that's where my struggle has been, is that I felt like almost, well, I won't say with everything, but with most things, depending on what the topic is, you feel like, well, I need to be a part of that because I need to give you this information that you may not know. And what I'm saying is, based on whatever I'm dealing with him in that regard at that time, I don't need any information. I'm giving something to him.
That's fine.
I'm imparting something to him, something I'm definitely going to talk about today and tomorrow, and then like it's a life lesson that I'm giving to him for his life.
And that's
so it
great.
doesn't. So I'm just saying, I don't need, in every situation, I don't need this prior information to be his dad. And I feel like I hear what you're saying in terms of, let me see if I can regurgitate what you're saying. You're saying that you want me to have information based on his identity of who he is today as a 9-year-old kid.
Sure. Like, okay, so I don't talk to DJ the same way I talk to Janaea because they're two different people and they process two different ways.
Likewise.
Sure. And so there are experiences. If I want to teach DJ a lesson, I can utilize information that I know of him to drive home this point, this life lesson that you're trying to teach. And my thing is, if I'm not saying that I have to be a part of every sit down conversation or every instructional experience that you have with our son. What I'm saying is, though, you and I don't talk enough about our children, and there are a lot of things that I think about or I want that I feel like, as you know, he should be getting information that I would love for you to teach him. But because you and I don't talk as much, I don't feel like he gets that. I don't feel like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't.
You don't feel like he gets what?
Like, I don't, like, there are a lot of times where, I'm not gonna say a lot of times, but there are times where I have seen qualities in him, or, you know, he's going through issues or things or whatever. And I'm like, oh, this would be a really good lesson. And there's an opportunity that you sit him down or whatever and talk, and I'm like, oh, there's some things that you may not know that I could be like, oh, by the way, you may want to say this or that to DJ, or based on this experience that I saw, or something that he came to me and said, hey mom, how about this, or what about that, or I saw something on TV and what is that all about? And I could be like, hey, by the way, and sometimes I forget, and I'm like, oh, if I could give this information to you, you could include that in the topic that's relevant.
So then I think it's very clear at the end of the day, sure, we should definitely, like, I agree with that.
Yeah.
It's not a flippant sure. That's definitely I agree, like, we should talk more. I have come to realize clearly that there's definitely a work for us to do from a communication standpoint, because I feel like the preservation aspect that I was living in was, I don't want to make you the enemy of how much I want my influence on my son's life to be felt by him. I don't want to be trying to do something with him and feel like you're coming up against that because you're like, oh, well, stop, wait, do this, do that. And I'm like, yo, seriously? I need you to back off. Now, granted, that's not a personal thing with you. That is me with my only son. That is my perspective, that when I think about me and my only son, I don't want any human being to get in the way of me having a beautiful, meaningful, and valuable to him impact on his life.
Absolutely.
And that can be in any regard, in any scenario. I don't want that infringed upon.
So do you feel like I'm infringing upon that?
So I will say this. I felt that way initially because that's all I had. I had me trying to do something with him. And then, like, you know, when I bring him to the side and I try to talk to him, like, I've had legit times and I felt like I shouldn't have to do this, and I'm not going to do this, but I've had to pull him aside and, like, whisper things to him because I don't want to hear you. Hey, what y'all talking about? What y'all doing? I'm like, yo, back off. Like, I'm talking to my son. Like, that's how I would legit feel. Like, when I am talking to him, that is not the time to come to me to offer any more information. Like, that opportunity might be gone right now. I am talking to him about something specific in that moment, and I'm not perfect, and I don't want to be perfect. But will there be moments where I have to go back and apologize? Sure, but I'm willing to risk that in that moment if it means that this could be a defining moment in his life where he can learn something. Then I'm going to go for it. I have zero fear in that regard because I know the kind of man that I am. And yes, there are definitely men out there that are like, yo, I want you to be better than me. I want you to not make all the mistakes that I made. And I know he's going to make a lot of mistakes. I know he's going to do a lot of things that we're not going to be proud of. And all. I know that's how life is. But when it comes to me being able to be in his life, there is a certain level of defensiveness that I get. And it's not reserved for you. It is just no different than your mama bear perspective. It is that papa bear perspective that in moments where I feel like I can have more of an impact on my son being out of the house because I'm working, that I'm like, yo, every time I come home, hey, it's good to see you. How's everything? Good, cool. Everybody kind of go their different ways watching TV or whatever. When I find a moment where I can actually pour into him from the moment's sake, not just like, hey, he's watching TV, I'm watching TV. You know what? Let me call him upstairs and give him a nugget about life. Like, no, this is a real life moment happening now that I want to pour into him.
Okay.
So when those moments happen, I want to make sure that I can do that without anybody getting in the way of that. And if it works out well, praise God for that. If it falls and crumbles to the floor, I have no problems going back to my son, my child son, and repenting, because he needs to see that too. Because one day he's going to be a father, and he needs to see what it is to be fathered, because that's going to mold how he's going to father in the future. And so I'm 100% aware of all those things. But I do feel like the more we can communicate, the less any of that feeling, at least on my end, of you're infringing, and it's faceless. Like, I don't even attribute that to you. I don't get mad at you as a person, but I am defensive because I'm like, this is my son's life right now that the Lord has made me responsible for, and I'm not giving up those opportunities easily. I'm not going to have a moment to lead, teach, nurture, whatever, and it be interrupted because someone's like, hey, what are you talking about? Or what are you doing? Or, oh, let me edit. No, like, not right now. So I think the better thing is, instead of the not right now, beforehand, let's have the conversation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so I hear everything that you're saying, and I feel that. I feel it 100 times. I feel it as strongly as you do. I feel like it's so important for my son to see you as his main voice. I do. To the point where I want to know what your voice is so that I'm not doing anything to undermine it by mistake, because I am the one that he sees the most. I'm the one he sees the most. But what I want him to hear your voice louder than mine, which means I need to be saying the things that you're saying. I need to be a part of what you're saying. Now, hopefully, through this conversation, you and I talk more so that when you have these random times where you want to impart, I know what you're going to say, because you and I have the same goal for our son. But if you're pulling him off to the side, and I don't know if it's going to be because of punishment, I don't know if it's going to be because of, I just want to have like a nice little bonding moment. I don't know what it is. And I don't know where you're going to come from. And I want to make sure that, especially if you're about to yell at him, that you're not yelling at him unjustifiably.
Sure.
I feel like it's important, like I said again, that we just talk, because when you go off to have these side conversations and then me and him have conversations throughout the day, I feel like I could be undermining your authority or your voice, and you're like, no one is going to take that away from me. And maybe not in the moment, but the next day, by mistake, I could be. Because you, in the moment, didn't want to tell me, and then afterwards, you didn't want to tell me either.
So I really hope that I've been clear with you as to why I do that. So the root is definitely, we need to talk. I don't want to have to do that. I don't want to have to pull him aside because I don't want you to interject, or because I don't want you. I think it's important, like you kind of said, I think it's important that you are in on that so that you can help further perpetuate the things that I'm trying to teach him, especially from a father to a son. I think that's very important that you be in on, I would even say, the majority of those things. Anything else I think is going to be, that I feel like would be more between me and him, is going to just be as he gets older. It'll be more boy, male stuff as he gets older. But especially as of now, like, we do have to be a united front.
Yeah.
And so I am all for that. I agree. We should definitely talk more. But I think at the end of the day, that's kind of the lesson for every topic in every marriage, is communication.
I agree.
So, well, thank you for talking to me.
You're welcome.
I love you, right?
Yes.
I get a little worked up about my boy.
I understand. You should.
But I love you, so you my girl, so you cute or whatever. I love you.
I love you too.